meeting of Chelmsford School Committee to order. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Got the check. Are we on?
We're on.
Okay, great. All right, this meeting is being live streamed by Chelmsford Telemedia and posted to the CPS website for interested community members to access and watch. In-person public participation will be taking place tonight in accordance with social distancing and safety protocols established by the Chelmsford School Committee Public Participation Guidelines. Anyone interested in speaking during the public input portion of the meeting tonight who notified the superintendent's office by yesterday afternoon has been provided with these guidelines and assigned a time to attend the meeting to speak. Anyone watching this meeting live has questions or comments to share. They're encouraged to email one of us during the meeting. We'll read their questions or comments during our second public input session at the end of the meeting. So welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. Don't believe the student reps are here, so we'll start off with some good news if we have any.
Sure, we got a couple of pieces of good news. The storm did not stop the students from McCarthy Middle School by having their play Moana Junior. They were able to just switch their Friday night to Sunday night, so that was very nice, and they had a good time. We have 9 students that will be representing CHS this year for the Massachusetts Music Educators Association, and it's their all-state festival, and they'll perform a concert at Symphony Hall next month. That's what we have for good news.
All right, anyone else? Jeff?
I didn't have the names last week, but the 3 attorneys in town who give up their time and their expertise to work with our mock trial team this year, it was Linda Dantis, Dennis McHugh, and Kevin Sullivan. And they really give a great deal of time. So I didn't have the names last week, but they do great work with the kids. It's all volunteer.
All right, anyone else have any good news? All right, we're now to our first public input portion of the meeting, but I don't believe we have any registered speakers.
We don't.
Okay, so we'll move on to new business.
Thank you very much. First order of business this evening is a presentation. We have Katie Sims, who is our department coordinator for health and physical education, and Shannon Bischoff, who is our new coordinator, just started this year, for social emotional learning and counseling services. So we've been talking a little bit about some of the work that they've been doing. I wanted to invite them here tonight to give a little bit of a presentation on your department. So we welcome you aboard, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us tonight. We are going to do 2 things for you tonight. We'll provide you with a social emotional learning update district-wide for you, kind of what's happening at each level across the district. And then we're also going to provide you with some mental health data and kind of a mental health update for the district and kind of where we're at level by level. So we'll first start off just talking a little bit about supporting students and staff returning to full in-person learning. What we have as far as mental health staff goes at each level in each building. We did the youth risk behavior survey this year in all grades 6 through 12. So we're gonna share some of that data with you tonight, specifically related to mental health data. And then we'll provide you with some updates of social emotional learning and then some action steps for future planning.
So thank you so much, Katie, and thank you to the committee for having us come tonight. We are very grateful that you're dedicating some time for this really important topic. I did watch school committee last week, and I know that the topic in the budget came up in terms of the need to respond. We know when we support students' social emotional learning, it impacts in positive ways their academic growth as well. So I'm very grateful to the committee for dedicating tonight to this topic. Before Katie jumps in and really shares out some of the new updated youth risk behavior data that we're going to share, I just think it's important to note that the pandemic has impacted our students and our families. It's impacted our Chelmsford community and beyond. I've had the opportunity this year to sit in on a lot of collaborative webinars within Massachusetts Massachusetts and beyond. So what we're experiencing here is not in isolation. It really is a statewide and nationwide and a global concern in terms of students' mental health and well-being. It is also important to note that prior to the pandemic, we were seeing concerning data showing that there was already a rise in mental health needs of our young people. So obviously, you can imagine the impact of the pandemic has catapulted the needs well beyond what it was prior to the pandemic. So just a couple different things that the mental health crisis is not only stressing our students, our families, and our school system, but our community practitioners as well. I think something that we do incredibly well at schools, both here in Chelmsford and at previous districts I've worked at, is partnering with community resources. Our community resources are very maxed out right now. So that's something we're going to talk a little bit about tonight and what we as a district can do to respond to some of those areas that need to be serviced in terms of kids and families. So again, just last statement, some of the articles I shared out with you, just to really note that this rise in mental health needs was here and existed prior to the pandemic, and the pandemic has really stressed our students and system even more. And so I love that this committee starts by sharing out good news. So the topic tonight obviously is a heavy topic. It's a concerning topic. We as a community, as partners, are really concerned about our students and our families and our community well-being. But on a good and positive note, we have incredibly dedicated and collaborative providers here within the district. We have a group of counselors and psychologists, administration teachers who are truly collaborating in response to the needs to respond to mental health needs of kids. So I just wanted to go over quickly district counseling and psychology staffing. This might be a review for a lot of you that are already very well aware of who we have and who we are. Much of the beginning part of my school year was just getting to know the different participants and providers that we have, and they've been fantastic to work with and highly collaborative. So starting at the preschool level, at the CHIPS program, we have a 0.5 social worker. She's a very skilled practitioner. She works on her other days as a private therapist practitioner. She has brought a wealth of knowledge to the team there, adding to our new, Megan McGurk is the new director there, so highly collaborative with her and bringing a lot of new programs in. At the elementary level, every school has a school counselor and a clinical psychologist, a doctorate level clinical psychologist. At the middle school level, we have 3 counselors in each one of the middle schools. And at Parker, a little bit different. We have 2 counselors and 1 school social worker, and they each have a school clinical psychologist, and they share one as well, so 1.5 for each middle school. At the high school, we have 6 guidance. I call them, they call themselves guidance, I call them school counselors. And we have 3 clinical psychologists, in addition to a counselor that is housed in our STEP program, which is something that Jay talked a little bit about at your last school committee meeting. And we'll talk about that later when we discuss future planning. In addition to the staff here at school, the psychology team for many, many years prior to me being here supports a learning program where we pull interns in from local colleges, from Boston College, from Boston University, Antioch, Riviere, from William James, from a variety of different colleges, and we provide a year-long training program for them. This year, we have a variety of different practitioners at different levels of their studies, and we have one intern who's here for a second time, and she's in her final year. So they are wonderfully collaborative, very helpful. They're learning, but they're also a wonderful resource for us in each one of the schools. So
Great.
I'm going to have Katie take it away and share out some youth behavior risk data.
All right, thanks, Shannon. So just a couple of things to note this year with the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and just to give you a little bit of history on it. They've been doing the Youth Risk Behavior Survey at the high school level for over 20 years, and we usually do it every other year. We started doing it at the middle school level about 6 years ago. The first year we did it, we just did it with 7th and 8th grade. And then we decided the second time that we would move it down to 6th grade. So 2 years ago, and then again this year, we did 6th, 7th, and 8th. This is the first time we have had an opportunity to do the survey online. So it's always been in paper form, and we were able to do it through Google Forms this year, which seemed to go extremely well. There's always the worry about Wi-Fi shutting down or something, some kind of hiccup with technology, but they did it on 2 different days. The middle school did one day and the high school did another, and we didn't have any issues at all, which was really nice. A benefit to, well, one benefit to doing it online is the amount of paper we saved, but another benefit is usually or typically in the past, we have sent out this data to be analyzed by a company, and we pay the company to do the data analysis for us. And it's usually a 4 to 6 month turnaround for getting the data back. So what was really nice, and I think the most beneficial part of doing doing the survey online, was we had instantaneous data that we were able to analyze in-house, and we did not have to send out to a company, which was really nice. So we were able to break down just the data in general by grade level, and then also by gender. So I tell you that because some of the data that I'm we're going to share with you tonight, you'll see in both kind of formats. And I would say, talking about first off the positives of the data, is just risky behaviors in general were way down from previous years and years before that. So just taking a look at some of those. So alcohol consumption in the past 30 days, that went down almost 10%. That's a huge percentage. We usually see anywhere from 1 to 3% increase or decrease kind of on average. So a 10% decrease is significant. Binge drinking was down 6-7%. Marijuana lifetime usage was down significantly, almost 15%. Driving in a car with someone who had been drinking, sexual intercourse, vaping was probably the most significant decrease, which was about 20%, which is great. So I think those are good things and things to highlight from the data. If someone asked me, do I think a lot of this is related to the pandemic, I would say yes. So it will be interesting to see kind of trends after when the pandemic's over and we do the survey again 2 years from now. But these trajectories are definitely good, but obviously people have been home more than ever in the past 2 years and maybe not participating in as many risky behaviors as we've seen in the past. So with that said, as far as mental health concerns, which is kind of the data that we pulled out of the survey for you tonight, those areas are either stagnant or have had a slight increase. And like Shannon previously mentioned, mental health concerns, suicide ideation, those were concerns to us prior to the pandemic. And I think they were just exasperated a little bit more by the pandemic and are either kind of staying static where we don't want them to stay, or even going up a little bit, which is obviously not where we want those numbers to go. So just taking a look at kind of numbers of who took the survey, the breakdown by gender, I think it's important just to have this perspective and just to note this when looking at the data. So first of all, when we're talking about middle school data tonight, we're talking about 91% of our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, which is a great number to have. And obviously, definitely statistically significant for sure. As far as looking at different genders, this is also the first time we've ever pulled out any data that wasn't just male or female. So previously, when we've sent our data off in the past to different companies to analyze the data, and students were able to select other options, transgender, non-binary, other, the numbers weren't high enough to pull it out as a kind of a data analysis. So we thought that this year they were high enough to pull those numbers out, so you would be able to compare male versus female versus male and female transgender versus other. So just for when you're looking at the data, just so you know, male transgender, female transgender, and non-binary are all in one category. So you can see on the PowerPoint that those are all in green. So when we're talking about those three categories put together, we're talking about 36 students, which is definitely a significant number, but not as high as a male student, which is 565 of those. So I think it's just important to note that when you're looking at the data. And then we pulled the other category out separately, because that in itself had 22 students. Now, unfortunately, we don't know what that other category is. There wasn't an opportunity for students to write in, which is something we could talk about maybe in the future. But it could be students that maybe are not sure, or we're not sure what the question was asking, or not sure how they identify at this moment. But that's kind of just another category that we're not specifically sure about yet, on what they meant. As far as the high school students go, the percentage of students that took it is definitely lower and lower than it's historically been in the past. So we had 80% of our 9th through 12th graders take the survey. And it all really had to do with timing. We didn't think about this beforehand when we were planning on when to do the survey. We did it right after the holiday break. So there were 200 students absent from school that day. So it wasn't that we had that many opt-outs or didn't want to participate in it. It was just kind of the timing of it all. So important to note that 20% of our high schoolers did not take this survey, when you're kind of looking at the data. And then as far as the breakdown, we did it the same as the middle school. So it's broken down by gender and then by grade. Female transgender, male transgender, non-binary are all in one category together, and then other is its own category. So taking a look at the data, so one thing I think that Chelmsford and the staff and the administration and everybody else that works in the schools, I think they hold this question: is there one teacher or adult in the school that you can talk to if you have a problem? I think that holds a lot of weight with us. It's a question that, as far as data goes, that's always one of the questions that the principals or assistant principals or the staff kind of want to look at first, as kind of a highlight. Like, how many of our students feel like they have someone in the building that they can go and talk to? So you can see on this graph here, it's broken down. You can see by gender and by grade level on this one. So you can kind of compare the two. And just thinking back to the last time we did the survey was 2020. So at the middle school level, 67% said yes in 2020. And this year it was 66.9, so about 67%. So it's about the same. Talking to the middle school building administration, I think it's an area that they wanted to work on 2 years ago, and I think that they've put some things in place, which we're going to talk about in a little bit tonight, to work on this, and something that they're certainly still concerned about, and that they would like to kind of raise this number. and obviously make that yes a higher percentage. And I think the interesting part of this particular question is kind of the unsure. There's quite a high number of students that are not sure if they have someone to talk to. So again, could some of that be pandemic related? Absolutely. But it's also an area I think we can act on, kind of immediately, that you don't need to put anything specific, any specific programming in place for. So looking at the same question at the high school level, it's gone down about 5% from the previous time that we've taken it, the survey. So in 2020, it was 81.7% said yes. And looking at this current data, it's about 76% of the students say that they feel like they have someone in the building that they can go and talk to. Oops. Looking at the next question. So there's a series of questions in the survey that have to do with suicide ideation and self-harm. So this question is specifically in regards to self-harm. So injuring yourself on purpose, whether that's cutting, bruising, things like that. So it's asking students to kind of report on like the previous 12 months. And looking at that data, it's pretty stagnant from 2020, but obviously a number that we would like to see go down, as far as obviously we don't want any students self-harming themselves. But we would like to see that number go down and not stay stagnant or go up. So we have about 85% of our students reporting that they're not doing it at all. So about 15% saying that they've injured themselves on purpose at some point at the middle school level. The same question at the high school, kind of similar trends as far as from the past survey to this year. It's a little bit higher, so 83% this year said that they had never tried, and then in 2020 it was also 83%. So that number is pretty stagnant. So the next question that we pulled some data on is in the past 12 months, have you seriously thought about killing yourself? So pretty serious question. I realize that. And some tough data that, 12.7% of our students have said yes to that question. And that's in grades 6, 7, and 8. Honestly, that number's a little bit lower than 2020, which it was 13.3%. So that number is actually moving in the right direction. But obviously, that number is concerning in itself. And just taking a look, this graph for you is just pulled out by gender. And just taking a look, I think, at that other category and the transgender and non-binary categories, I think it's something to note that they are higher, and that's good data for us that we can work with those students and try to support them. So not great data to have to look at, but I think great data for us to have to be able to be proactive. And then taking a look at the same question at the high school, it has gone up a little bit at the high school, a few percentages. So taking a look at this data, 14.4% of our students said yes to this question. And then in 2020, we were about at 11.5%. So again, a concerning number, and definitely shows the need that students just need some more mental health support, just in general. Another question that we asked was in regards to the last 30 days. So the last couple of questions before this were kind of 12 months over the course of a year. So this one is a little bit more, a shorter amount of time. So how often students felt like their mental health was not good, either stress, anxiety, depression. And for the middle school, so 73% didn't say, well, what was it? 73% outside of it said never. So I think one thing to note for this particular question, this is the first time that we asked this question in middle school, so we don't have any historical data on this. But I think also good data just for general mental health and how students are feeling on a daily basis. And based on this data, I think, kids are, feeling the stress, anxiety, depression on a pretty regular basis in some form. And then for the high school, the question is worded a little bit differently, and it's over the course of 12 months. Just feeling sad or hopeless every day for 2 weeks or more. And this one, as far as data goes, it was a little bit higher than the previous time we had taken the youth risk behavior survey in 2020. So 31.6% said yes. And then in 2020, it was about 28.8% that said yes, which is a significant increase, and I think a significant amount of time that you're feeling sad and hopeless for 2 weeks or more in a row. The next question asks about if you've made a plan in the last 12 months to killing yourself. So this one is down actually from the last time we did it. So 5%, about 5% said yes to this question. And back in 2020, 8.5% said yes. So that is actually a pretty decent decline. Again, we don't want any percentage in this category, but I think it's nice to see moving in a,
Just ask one thing on that.
Yes.
Does that include the breakdown with transgender, non-binary, or was transgender, non-binary included in female, male, other last time?
are you talking about this particular
Yes.
question?
Yes.
Yeah, so this one, it's broken down by all 4 gender categories.
And the last time it was as well? It was the same breakdown?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, you mean the last time we took the survey?
Uh-huh.
So that's a good question. So the last time we took the survey, yes, it included all those students, but the way the survey the data was reported out, it was only reported out male, female.
Right.
So we don't have like a comparison from transgender, non-binary from 2022 to 2020. Yes,
Thank you.
that's a very good question. So yes, they were included in the data, but they weren't pulled out to show in a graph or a data analysis. And then same question for the high school. And again, you can see that we broke it down by gender as well. And that other and transgender, non-binary categories are definitely higher than the other 2, than male and female. So the last question that we pulled some data out for you. So the first one is grades 6 through 8, which of the following are you trying to do about your weight? So one of the reasons we pulled this data out for mental health is, you might remember me talking about self-harm and some of the things, cutting, bruising, that students might do. So weight sometimes plays into that self-harm piece. So we thought it was important to share that data with you as well. So you can see kind of where students are at. You know, there's the, I'm not trying to do anything about my weight, which is good. Oh, those are all good things. That's a good thing. Staying the same weight, that's good. The more concerning numbers is the, you know, the percentage of number of students that are trying to lose weight. And then there's also a decent amount of students that are also trying to gain weight. So not to say they're related to some kind of self-harm, but it's important to note that sometimes that is a way that students that may self-harm themselves is through weight, because it's something that they can control. So this is the middle school data for you, and then for the high school, same question, and also broken out by gender in very similar trends as far as the percentages of students kind of not trying to do anything versus, you know, losing weight is a little bit higher, and then gaining weight is right behind it. So that's just kind of a summary of some of the data. Obviously, we had a lot of data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, but since tonight was focused on social emotional learning and mental health, we try to pull out some of that data that we felt was most applicable to that information. So I'll pass it on to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. And this is just like Katie was sharing, this is a snapshot of the data that we've collected. And the incredible change in the data collection method that was used this time is that it's real-time data. So Katie had this, I mean, it took hours and hours of data analysis for her to produce, you know, this information for us. But instead of waiting 4 months, we had this within weeks. So the next step is for us to take this data and meet at the school level and support the school staff in building a response to the data. So a couple of themes, we called it a summary slide. And again, I just want to share out that when Katie shared the data with me, I was shaking my head, aha, because it really mirrors what we're seeing in the school setting. It mirrors what our clinicians are receiving in terms of student need. So, you know, we have this data. Now, what are we going to do with it? So just some themes. The overall number of students seeking mental health and counseling support in schools has increased. So the needs have increased, and also the outside supports that are readily available to students and families have, I don't want to say they've decreased, but they're just at capacity. So it's put some stressors on our clinicians in the school system. Community supports are difficult to access and have longer wait lists. I'm doing a lot to network both locally and in our broader community to make our pool of resources larger. We typically can really rely on Project Interface through William James. And I don't know if all of you are aware, but when we returned from the January break, we learned that they had to shut down. They're at capacity in terms of receiving new intakes. So on their website, if you try to access their services, it says try back February 21st because we're at capacity. They apologize. And I've utilized that service for many, many years, and I've never seen them have to shut down for a period of time. So I think, again, that speaks to the need and the volume that our community supports are receiving, as well as us here at the school. And then in addition to just the volume of students that returned from the COVID pandemic or remote learning or hybrid learning with needs, we have a higher volume of students seeking support, but we also have a greater need. So we're seeing a rise in symptoms such as anxiety, depression. Katie pulled out that eating data for us because there is also a correlation right now, new off the press, that there's some correlation to the pandemic and a rise in eating disorders with students, suicidal ideation and attempts, and an increased number, particularly for female students, that's noted. So we are seeing and receiving those students in the school system. So we want to work to increase our tools and our SEL resources for our clinicians here. So one of the things that we're doing is partnering with lots of different collaboratives around the state to provide more training for our staff. One thing that we applied for right before the Christmas break was to be a part of 10 other districts to train our clinicians here at school to give them a higher level of group mental health training tools and strategies to use, specifically focused on trauma-informed practices. So actively right now, there is a clinician in every one of our schools that's participating, and that is up and running. So one of the trainings has already happened, and the next two will be up and running in the next coming weeks. We have an orientation this Thursday. So our clinicians at the school level are really hungry for more strategies and support so that they can respond. We're going to continue to sustain all of our partnerships with community resources, and absolutely key most important thing is partnering with families and caregivers at home. We really want to send the message that yes, schools are, we are busy, we're up and running, we're filling academic gaps, but we are absolutely here to receive your student in terms of their social, emotional, and mental health needs. So we want to make sure we hear from families. We are absolutely here to support them, help them, and get them connected in the community. There may be wait lists, but we're working with community agencies to respond. One thing that I think, I don't know if Jay talked a little bit about it last week when you met, but hospitals that are not only our mental health system, but also our healthcare system is at capacity. So typically, if we use like a crisis response, a mobile crisis, we use Leahy Behavioral Health here in Chelmsford. We lean on that support service, and at times we need to use our local hospitals and emergency rooms. So I just want everybody around this room to know that even those systems are stretched and are at capacity. So students who are in need of services, who have gone through all of the triage in terms of the mobile crisis, are waiting for supports and services programs, partial programs, inpatient programs. It takes time for those openings to open up. So our healthcare system is receiving and supporting those students. And at times we here at the school system is having to support those children who are at the level of need to need an inpatient. It's just not readily available yet. And let's see. Continue, Katie, her very first data slide around connecting, building connections, building relationships. I want to circle back to that, as Katie shared out, that is of the utmost importance to all of my new colleagues here in Chelmsford, is building those connections with students, letting students know how much we care. So I think responding and continuing to build those relationships, connections, a sense of community, rebuilding that post, remote learning and the COVID pandemic to support all of our students and our families. So an overview, I'm on the next slide, Linda.
I just had a question before you.
Yeah, please.
Some of the more concerning numbers, I guess, are centered around, the non-binary, transgender. Do we have clubs, support programs within the middle school, the high school?
Yes,
These people,
It's such a great question. Thank you for asking that. And we have a very dedicated team of students and staff supporting those students both at the middle school and the high school level. This year, we've connected the middle school and high school together so that they're sharing resources with one another. It's called the GSA. And I think they have more students involved than in years past. So absolutely, that's an after-school club and program. But we want to support those students during the school day as well. So at the middle school level, both at Parker McCarthy and at the high school, just this week, we did a training around LGBTQ education, learning pronouns, what students' preferences are in terms of how they identify. So we're at the beginning stages of just educating our staff. The GSA at the high school, one of their goals, they want to create an educational video to share with our staff, our colleagues, so that the students can educate us about the topic. And then at a more of a collaborative level, at the statewide level, I attend regularly an SEL job-alike group throughout the state. And so we're building like a database of resources to respond to the needs of those students. And we're tapping into a lot of group work through like teletherapy because kids can't get there. So we're really trying to build a nice database because everybody in Massachusetts is sharing out that there's a need in this area. So, but thank you for asking that. And the other thing too, I don't know if I mentioned it on that very first slide, but just to acknowledge that our more vulnerable populations were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And I think it's so important to note that. And through our lens, respond to that here at the school level. Maria, you look like you have a question. Yeah.
On the same,
Yeah.
the same type of topic. And within the system, knowing that we have these number of students who in a survey are identifying this way and so on, what do we do within the entire system to make sure that they are consistently identified the way that they want to be identified? What are we doing throughout the entire, from, K through 12?
It's amazing. That question, one of my very first tours I got of the elementary school, some of the team members I met with over the summer, they asked me, what can we do to be more inclusive? So looking at things like, bathrooms, how we identify gender bathrooms, making sure it's more uniformly, accepted in terms of having a variety of different bathrooms, going in and out of the training that we just did in terms of the middle school and the high school, providing the education to educators is going to allow them to look around the classroom. What can we do to be more inclusive? Little things like the tags to go to the bathroom are sometimes identified via gender. So those are some small things that we can do to respond. And it's certainly looking at content that's more equitable in our practices in terms of literature that we're reading, just to make it more inclusive. So, and our team at the high school, they participated in a training way back in the fall around just laws associated with this, just to really clarify, what are the rules? Because I think Katie just shared with me right before we sat down that, a teacher had a question, what do we do when a student says, I identify with this name, what are the next steps? So those conversations, the collaboration, the dialogue to support students is how we're responding, but it's a really important question at every level, K all the way up, to think about and respond to. So moving on, just an overview of social emotional learning updates by level. Right now, I'm excited to share out, again, this is a bit of good news following a lot of really challenging data to listen, to hear and learn about. But we do have social emotional learning curriculum at every level, from preschool all the way up. This year, new at the CHIPS preschool, we're using the Teaching Pyramid Observation Tool, otherwise known as TPOT. And that's been done in collaboration with the educators there, with the school social worker, and with Megan McGurk, the director. So that's newly piloted. They're starting in 3 classrooms and growing it. At the elementary level, long before my time here, there is a systems approach in terms of a tiered response, MTSS, at every level, elementary all the way up to high school, where we have MTSS facilitators that actively participate, Tier 1, Tier 2, they meet regularly. I participate in a lot of those meetings just to learn more about what each school is doing in response to MTSS. And I don't want to go too much into detail about that, because I know each school is so proud of the work that they're doing, and they all get to come here and share all of the information with you. So I'm not going to get too much into that. But there is a tiered system, Tier 1, Tier 2 teams that meet at every level, MTSS facilitators. Like I shared, Katie and I plan to respond to meeting at the school level to look at the youth behavior risk survey data. At the middle school, and brand new this year, we have Second Step. It was utilized previously at the elementary school level. It's a CASEL-aligned SEL curriculum. What's different this year is that elementary has moved to the digital curriculum, which is brand new this year. So K all the way to 8 is using Second Step. I've gotten rave reviews from educators and from students. I actually sat with a team of students to get their feedback. When I go into the classroom and I watch a lesson, I'm not listening to what the teacher's saying. I'm looking at kids to make sure I'm seeing engagement and that kids are learning. So when I surveyed students, they really had a lot of wonderful things to say about Second Step. the cohort of students I met were seventh grade students who were very honest. And they said they're learning from it. They're learning about goal setting. They're learning about how to remove obstacles to learning, roadblocks they're called. Another student shared out, I'm learning how all about different emotions and how I can regulate emotions. So they were really able to target and identify the learning and how they're applying it through Second Step. And when I meet in my social emotional learning job-alike teams within the state and beyond, a lot of people are using Second Step. So we are aligned in that. So brand new, prior to this year, the Second Step SEL curriculum was not utilized at the middle school level. So this was new this year. Both Parker and McCarthy have embraced it at the classroom level, the administrative level, and it's going really well. Like I said, I've sat in on lessons, I've interviewed students, and asked for feedback, because this is the first year that they've shared out the digital curriculum, and so I'm giving feedback to the company to say, this is what we'd like more of. And one thing the student says, we like the videos, the real life videos, and the students can really relate to the videos. There's students that might look like them, and the response was the pandemic really limited the number of actors they could get to create videos during the pandemic, but they aim to increase that, as they move forward. So they're going to constantly be updating that digital curriculum. Katie and I partnered this year with her health teachers and with the school counselors to really dig deep and look at our suicide prevention and mental health awareness curriculum. And I think Katie said this was the first time we've kind of brought the two teams together. And that was really helpful because they teach the curriculum together, both the health teachers and the counselors. So we really looked broadly at the SOS curriculum that they've been using for years, and then we pulled on a new curriculum to say, are there resources in this new curriculum that we want to add? So they were highly collaborative. I thought that went incredibly well. And again, our goal being, we just want to put in front of students the most engaging content to help them and to teach them where to go for help, how to build self-awareness in terms of mental health. And our end result is obviously to prevent, any sort of risky behaviors around suicide. Character Strong is the SEL curriculum that was just introduced mid-year in December at the high school level. Again, this is brand new to the high school, and it's being received well by students. They are highly, highly engaged. Right now we're doing classroom lessons once per week in their advisory class, which is called the Plus Block, and it is taught by classroom teachers, not by counselors. And Katie and I hope to pull on another part of the Character Strong curriculum, which is also CASEL aligned, to do more school-wide SEL learning. And so we're hoping kids at the high school will grab these ideas, and we're going to make it more grassroots in terms of peer-to-peer learning and peer-to-peer support. One thing that I want to mention, it's so important during this time of the pandemic, and when we look at these statistics that are very alarming, and we as grown-ups are feeling, some of the stress, that we create a sense of hope and looking to our future. It's so important that students can recognize strengths in themselves, resiliency in themselves. So I absolutely am really excited about the one-credit course that the counselors are partnering with MCC. I think Steph has shared last time, a couple of school committees ago about it. But the exciting thing about that is that it allows our freshmen and sophomores to really dig deep and find some areas of interest. What am I good at? What can I see myself doing in the future? It is so important that we plant those seeds. Freshman's great, but even in middle school, I want to start to, talk about what can we do to provide that there as well. Because I think globally, when you look at mental health and you look at the impact it's having on our children, is that sense of a little bit of hopelessness, so how can we turn that around? How can we put things in front of students? So I love that 2 school committees ago, you had the opportunity to see all about dual enrollment, all about this one-credit course, because so much is happening, at the middle school and high school level to create that sense of hope and vision of the future for all of our students. Katie, do you want to take it away on district level?
Sure. So just talking about the district level and MTSS and SEL. We just thought it was important to note that we do have a district-wide MTSS team. It meets 4 to 5 times a year. Shannon and I co-chair that. I believe this is the 4th year that we've had this district-level team in place. And it's been a great resource for building administration, central office, at every level, someone is there and a part of it. We have at least one representative from every school on this committee. Some schools have more than one representative. And it's a great opportunity to talk about the SEL curriculums that we've brought in. Shannon just talked about, essentially grades 6 through 12. This is brand new to us. What's working, what's not working. Is this the right curriculum for us? Do we need to go in a different direction? What data are we collecting on this curriculum? What data are we collecting from students? Is it giving us a snapshot of what we really need? I know at the district level, they've also brought in therapy dogs for all the different schools. Which I know all of the schools and the students have really enjoyed. I think they've had them be part of the different vaccine clinics, which I heard some positive things about that as well. We talk about DEI at these district level meetings. There's clubs at the middle school and high school that we're forming right now to support different students in different backgrounds. They just recently had a mindfulness day at the high school where we just asked staff and students to focus on mindfulness throughout the course of the day. They had some different activities for students to sign up for, to attend, and then asked staff to do, a 5-minute mindfulness activity in their classroom. You talked a little bit about the trauma-informed practices that your staff is doing, and then just supporting our LGBTQ community and what other resources and supports we can bring in and what other tools that we can use to support them. I know, Maria, you asked about that earlier as well. So I would say, we're in the process of adding different things throughout the course of the district. I know one thing that we added in our health education curriculum at the middle school this year was a unit on, we tied it into our maturation unit, some more information on gender identity and gender stereotypes. And we put that into our advocacy unit. So how, here's the information and how do you advocate for yourself, right? You asked about, calling students by the right names, like how students communicate that to a teacher, like I would be like to called X. So that's something that we've put into place this year, and that has gone very well in our health education curriculum. But I think every meeting, every week, we're looking at new things to add and put in and to support all of our students in Chelmsford.
I think Donna had a question.
Yeah, Donna.
I don't know if I can make this reach.
Advocating for Donna.
Perfect.
So I have a question with regards to our staff. First is, what type of training do we provide to them to be able to identify students who may be in need of some additional help? The second is, we know that there's long waiting lists for kids in need of services. Sometimes the mobile evaluation unit will go out, sometimes they go to the emergency room and they pop them right back out and they could be back in your class, within a week, right? So what are we doing to help our staff be able to support these very fragile students in their classrooms, as they wait for, the opportunity to be able to meet with someone who can provide them with treatment over a longer period of time? And then the third part is, what are we doing for our staff? Because this is a lot on them too, right? This has also been very anxiety-provoking for them. Dealing with kids with mental health issues, certainly, as you're trying to navigate, just the day-to-day ins and outs of teaching is a lot. And I was just wondering if there was anything that we were doing to support our staff as well.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. Those are terrific questions. And one thing we did as a subcommittee to our district-wide MTSS is we had a subcommittee of a wellness group that got
Yeah.
together to talk exactly about that, because it's so important. You know, the pandemic has impacted adults, children alike in many different ways. So what can we do as a district to respond to that? So Katie had developed a survey a year ago in the midst of the pandemic. So we're pulling that survey to make it a resource for buildings to utilize or customize in terms of collecting what do teachers need right now, what do our providers need, and it's different for everyone. So we're trying to collect that data and respond to those needs. It is so important that teachers, everyone that works at schools right now, our cafeteria workers that are working so hard dealing with shortages, and I mean, at every level, it's impacted them. So just to, it's important for them to feel supported, listened to, and responded to. So I think, we're trying to create a sense of community around that. And also in terms of that, at the building level, administration has really targeted the PD days that are building-based days around resiliency, and they've brought a lot of wonderful providers in to do training around that. So not only is that supporting and validating our educators, but it's also giving them tools and strategies to bring back to the classroom with students. Charlie Applestein came, Chris Willard, who is a mindfulness and psychology professor at Harvard, came. So we're trying to build those PD days, the building-based PDs around that. And I think it speaks volumes to our administration wanting to respond to those needs, because they really are taking those building days that are available and targeting resiliency and social emotional learning. Was there a third?
No, just how are we,
Oh, and then identifying students.
yes,
So
supporting,
at-
them when
yeah,
they have kids in their classroom who are just waiting.
Sure. So at the school level, there's a clinical response team that meets on a weekly basis. Also, the tier 1 and tier 2 teams that meet regularly are also collecting data and responding to the need level and creating individualized responsive plans based on the tiered needs of students, with a variety of different responses. Some are small group, some are individual plans. So everybody has a stake in terms of responding to the needs. But the clinical response team, those are meeting weekly at the building level and involve administration, clinicians, and educators and specialists. And the nurses, I can't say enough, they've been a huge part of responding to the needs as well. Yeah, thank you, Donna.
Ask a question. Let's say at each level again, if a student has need to have access to a counselor, to access to a psychologist, whatever the need might be. Let's say at the elementary level, it's the parent that clues you in. At the middle school level and at the high school, it might be the student. Then how is that communicated out? I know that there are, privacy rights and whether these issues can be, let's say I come and I'm a high school student, I go to see my counselor, and I definitely have an issue that's being worked on. Are my teachers going to be notified? Are my parents going to be notified? How does it work? Is it automatic that everybody who that student is going to deal with on a daily basis is going to have is going to be notified? How does it work?
It's a great question, and I think you laid it out nicely by saying developmentally at the different grade levels, there might be a different response. At the high school level, the student really drives that in terms of their readiness to share information. We always advocate as a team that, we're all here to support you in terms of that wraparound approach. So the more we can share, the better, because that way we know how to respond and support you. Teachers spend the more time, with that student. But if a student is advocating and saying, this is okay to share, but this isn't, that's okay. They have to, and at the 8th grade parent night, I talked a little bit about self-advocacy. Students, and I'm a parent of 3 children, 2 in college and a senior this year in high school. And it's hard to let go as parents. We want to be in the driver's seat. We want to make sure that we're helping students make good decisions. But it's equally as important for students to feel like they have a stake and a say in terms of in terms of that process of what the needs are. If it's in terms of safety, it changes a little bit in terms of how quickly we respond and stuff like that. And at the elementary level, clearly, we include parents as much as we possibly can at all levels. I mean, our first go-to, even at the high school level, is, we're a team and we partner with families. But yeah.
The reason I'm asking this question is because, of course, mental health is health, period. So if it's part of your health, let's say you were sick for any reason and it's communicated out to your teachers and it's a physical thing, it's much more obvious and teachers can more easily give you assistance, give you more time and so on. When it's an issue of mental health and so on, if it's not shared and the teacher is not able to know what's going on, then in that instance, how do they support the student? How are they able to help them academically to achieve what they need to achieve? So just to make people, I think it's important to know that it might not be automatically communicated out unless you consent
Yeah.
for it to be so.
That's, I guess, what I was getting at is I think that this is where I think it's so imperative that the teachers have the training. Because you may not have the specific student name, but if you understand how to handle certain issues, then, or to be able to identify, even without being named, students who may be struggling in class and what supports are available to you or what interventions you can use in the classroom. I think that's really key, for the teachers. They can't name the students necessarily individually, but, teachers are pretty adept at being able to figure out, once they have enough tools, how it is that they can use them to be able to support the students they have in the classroom.
Yeah.
I don't mean to speak for you, but.
No, and I
No.
think what you're saying, in terms of the well-being and what's best for kids, it would be so great if the curtain was open and everybody had all the information, but confidentiality is critical to students responding to care. So I think there is that element and that balance. But again, we have an incredibly skilled counselor that works in the STEP program at the high school, and she works very closely and collaboratively with all of the teachers at the high school in terms of triaging and working with students to self-advocate and self-identify. So our last slide, and again, we've talked a lot about this, so I'm not going to go through it in detail. I really do want to frame that, although that we talked about a very heavy topic tonight, and that we've identified a lot of needs and things that need responding to, I just want to share out that there's so much good happening in the Chelmsford school districts. We have incredibly hardworking, dedicated, and collaborative clinicians throughout the district, pre-K all the way to 12. Are they tired? Yes, but they're here and they show up every day and they care so much about students. And I don't want to stop there because I think, it's the educators in the building, it's the administration in the building. So a highly, highly collaborative approach to respond to the needs of students and continue to identify on a daily basis what are the obstacles for students meeting their potential and experiencing success. So that's our job on a daily basis that we strive for. So I've talked a little bit about the group mental health training opportunity that's become available to our clinicians here that we're actively participating in. Our SEL job-alike resources that we are constantly trying to, throughout the state of Massachusetts, share as much as we can, because as I shared when we first started talking, that the stressors that we're experiencing here are mirrored in every other district around Massachusetts right now. Katie mentioned the therapy dogs. We're researching a variety of different apps that we might make available to some of our high school students to have more accessibility to support when it's needed in a timely manner. I've been working with Chris O'Donnell around the website to create a bank of resources for families. So that's one of my goals that I have on my agenda. Investigating resources to facilitate referrals. So with Project Interface shutting down for this past month, I went ahead and looked into another resource referral agency called Care Solace. And that's something that I'm looking into right now. It mirrors the type of service that Project Interface provides. They are up and running right now, and there's lots of local districts that are utilizing that support right now. So that's something that is hot off the press. I haven't had a chance to collaborate with Amy Reese about that yet. I sat in about an hour yesterday with one of their reps just to ask a lot of questions about what they can provide for us. We're trying to, again, bring providers in to empower students to have self-awareness about mental health. I mentioned Ivy Watts that we're hoping to bring in the spring. We right now have the K-12 SEL curriculum, I should say pre-K-12 SEL curriculum at every level, so that every student, Tier 1, is learning, all of the expected SEL competencies, the tiered response approach in each school, the mental health awareness and suicide prevention that Katie and I collaborate on at both the middle school and the high school level. And lastly, we're assessing our mental health staffing at all levels. And I think I'll end it there because I think, again, I cannot thank the team that builds our budget is listening, not just to me, but to all of our providers, our educators around the district, to say there's a need here that we need to respond to. We need to broaden our supports that we can provide. The idea of bringing in trained social workers to do a lot of the case management and the triage and supports in terms of connecting schools with communities, it is going to make a world of difference. So I'm very grateful to the committee for considering that in the upcoming budget that's been proposed. So I'll stop there.
Anyone have any questions?
Just a comment. I'm sure you'll need some time to think about this, and we've seen Dr. Lang's recommendations in the budget, but if there's anything else that you can think of, because the waiting lists are long, and to be perfectly honest with you, before the pandemic, I think that we were already seeing waiting lists because there wasn't a lot of people out there that were treating kids and adolescents. It was just the numbers were shrinking. So if there's something that you can think of that we can do to help support our students and our staff, as we move forward, I hope that you'll let us know, because I think it is imperative that, that we help these kids out, and I recognize, we're only a school district, right? And that some of the needs go beyond what it is that we can provide, but if there's something that we can do on a day-to-day basis, then, as I said, I hope you'll let us know.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
The same thing, I want to thank you for doing the presentation. I had been asking for quite some time if we could have one, and I really appreciate that you've done it. You've come at a really necessary time into the district. It's good to see the teamwork between the two of you here. I'm part of the Wellness Committee, so I get to see Kate all the time here. I think that for the first time in this lifetime that I'm living, I think people are beginning to see for sure that health is about both mental, emotional, social, intellectual, everything, and physical, of course. But it's about it all. And I think for the first time, when I talk to young people, they just naturally talk about all of it, which is great. So it's a big job. The numbers to me are actually sad. I'm hoping to see huge changes, but I know that it's a lot of work and commitment to do it. I appreciate all the efforts everybody's putting into it, and I know that the staff is tired too. And I know that everybody in this team is working extremely hard to make sure that we can provide the best services possible. So, thanks.
Jeff, you had something?
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for all the hard work, and I know how difficult it is for our students and our staff when there are people in our country who, if you're different, are condemning you all the time. So if we work with our students in the school, we can build up their confidence, we can build up, their resilience, and you just don't want to turn on the TV or pick up the newspaper because there's so many, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but intolerant people in this world that, just have to be kind. You just have to be kind. And we're here such a short amount of time. Why make it difficult for anybody? And it's not fair that when I looked at the numbers, you know, for the other kids and the trans kids, and all the kids, children shouldn't have to feel this way. And it's wrong that there are issues in the world that make them feel that way. And, you know, many of us here have dedicated our lives to making it better for kids. And I can't thank you enough, the staff enough. And I've always said that when I worked at the school, that the priority is always the safety and the health of our children. And thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much. And on that note, I think Katie and I are here. We're representing the teams that we collaborate with and work with. We're sharing the data, but they are doing this hard work every single day. So thank you for saying that. And I know they will continue to work hard throughout the school year to support students. I mean, every child matters. I want to end with that. Just every child matters, and no stone unturned to remove obstacles to learning and meeting every student's potential.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, and you just made kind of the point I was going to make, was that when you look at all the data and it talks about budget, and then you get to come here and sit in front of us and you get to show us the charts, at the end of all of that, at the beginning of that path, there is a kid somewhere in a house, a woman, transgender, male, somebody, that pressed the button that said, hey, no, I don't feel like I have an adult I can talk to. So, we're talking about big numbers and all of that, but just understand that the people on this committee know that at the end of all that line, there's a person, there's a human being. It's not just about the numbers at the school committee level or the budget. At the end of the day, we just have to continue to help our kids. And I don't think you'd find anybody on this committee or the staff that wouldn't support more SEL and more SEL all the time. So, and just side note, I love dog therapy. I was in Afghanistan, they had dog teams that went around, and dogs are universally good for therapy. So I'm glad that you do that, and if you need more support on it, I would definitely support.
I might take you up on that.
Well, thank you for coming tonight. Hopefully we hear from you next year about, we're on the backside of COVID and all these new supports that we have in place, hopefully our kids' mental health and their emotional well-being will be on the upturn.
Yes.
Thank you so much to the committee.
Yes, thank you for having us.
I'll take this. All right, so the next item on the agenda, we just put this on here in case anybody on the committee had any just general questions on the budget. I know it was just presented next week. I know last week, next meeting, we're going to have the budget hearing, and we'll go through everything line by line, but if anybody in the committee had some general questions they wanted to ask today, I also wanted to make an agenda spot in case anybody from the public wanted to come tonight and had some questions or comments they wanted to share, so they could do that at the beginning of the meeting. So, again, I know we have the budget hearing coming up next meeting for going through it, but if anybody have any just general questions they'd like to ask at this point?
So for me, I have something that I would like to make sure that it does get addressed when we have the meeting on budget. And one of the biggest concerns for me, and I've addressed it several times in the past year, is class size. That to me is extremely important. I think, and we've received some questions on this. So what I want to know with a bit of certainty as we go along in this budget process is that if there are numbers that are above average, because right now our policy is 25 average. We could revisit that if the committee wanted to do that. We haven't revisited that number, but we could. But you're planning and you're budgeting towards that guidance that we've provided to you. I want to make sure that whatever we're doing here in this budget, that stays at that average number going forward, and that I want to know that I have some assurance that that's going to be so. Okay, and I've looked at some numbers in the past, classes with 27, 28 people in it. It's not what happens in every class, but it happens in some. And given that we are coming out of COVID and this pandemic and what we just heard tonight, I do know that it makes a difference if you're trying to deal with a lot more, greater number of students in a classroom. So I'd just like to make sure that, that's addressed in some way. Because we are increasing staff, but we're increasing staff in a new program. Again, I see the need for it. But, what's the greatest hit? Is it, adding more staff to decrease class size, or is it adding more staff to help in other issues that are just as important, very likely? But I just want to know, I want to know with some assurance for that, and if we can address that going forward in the budget.
Sure. I mean, on that note, the school committee policy that you kind of referenced, we do have a policy that talks about class size guidelines, and these are average guidelines. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I believe it's like at the K-2 level, we try to target and have the smallest class sizes we can. So we have about a 22 average class size that we try, it's either K-1 or K-2. And then grades 3 and up, primarily the middle school and the high school, the average class size target is 25. Yeah, that's what we kind of build our budget to. It's averaging, so you are going to have situations where you have a class that has more than 25 students in it. And this does come up particularly, say, at the middle school level, which we've talked about in the past, or even, say, at the high school level. If you have, say, like a singleton-type course, or you have a course where you have enough students, to offer, say, 1 or 2 sections of something, but you wouldn't have enough students to justify being able to offer, say, 2 sections. So if we have a class, Class A, that, we have 28 students that are interested in taking a class because we're going through the enrollment process right now at the high school. So we have 2 options. We have the option of, operating a class with 28 students in it as a singleton-type class. We technically could offer 2 sections, and we would have 14 students and 14 students in another class. But if you have, that's too low of a class size, in my opinion, because then you basically are tying up an extra section that really probably should be dedicated to something else, or your overall averages are going to be off. You have the situation where you can cap a class at the high school level, let's say. So if we wanted to say we were going to cap a class at, say, 25, we would have to look to 3 kids and say, unfortunately, you can't take this class because we're going to cap it at 25. You're going to have to select another class. We typically go through a process, and again, at the high school level, it's a little different than the middle school level because the kids are picking more, they have more options. It's kind of like a menu to pick from. But we would actually look and say, you know what, depending on the level and the type of class, it's okay to have, say, 28 kids, and we'd rather have the 28 kids be able to have this class as opposed to saying, no, you can't have it to 3 kids. So that kind of play does happen. And, we also look to say, we're approaching 30 or 35, where maybe you can justify having 2 sections. They might be smaller sections, but we don't usually get in a situation where you can justify having like 12 or 14 kids in a class. Again, particularly if you're talking a higher level class, if it's an honors class or an AP class or something like that. And even when I was teaching, I would be okay if I had 25, 26, 27 kids in an honors AP type class. If I had a class that was a lower level, maybe had some students who are struggling a bit, I would want my class sizes to be lower so that they're a little bit more optimal, so you can spend more time with those kids. At the middle school level, again, we have 25 as the average. It's an average, so you are going to have some sections that have more than 25, and some sections are going to have less than 25. We do have certain circumstances at the middle school level, and I think I mentioned this previously, like the math program, where at the middle school level, we have like leveled math. So we currently have a situation where teachers are teaching by team, and say the math teacher on the team would teach 4 classes. Based on the way the numbers work, if you have, let's say there were 100 kids, right? You're not going to have 25 kids who are going to be in the honors program and 25 kids in another program and 25 in the other levels. You might run into a situation where you have 26 or 27 or even 28, it's happened, who would qualify for, say, the honors math program. And you don't have enough wiggle room right now within the confines of the way we schedule to have 2 sections of 14. So again, instead of saying no to 3 kids, We typically would allow that class, and again, if it's an honors level class, to have higher than the 26. You're going to have other classes that are going to have lower. So that does happen by averaging. Again, our policy and the way we build our budget is to average class sizes. These are not caps on classes. One of the things, and again, I've gotten the emails that you have at one of the middle schools concerned about just generic or general class sizes. And that is something that we're going to work with. I had mentioned, I actually had a staff meeting with the two middle schools yesterday to lay out a couple of different initiatives that we're working with in the district. One is I wanted to talk about the strategic planning work. I wanted to talk about the Durham Whittier work. I think one of the longer-term solutions to maybe class size might be the concept that we've kind of broached, where do we look at our middle schools differently? And instead of operating two standalone grade 5 to 8 middle schools, do we look at combining those two middle schools and having one service grades 5 and 6 and the other service grades 7 and 8? That would provide equity in numbers. You wouldn't have any disparity because all the programs would be in the same building. There are a number of different pros to that as far as providing an equitable experience for all 5th and 6th grade students in the district. Being able to operate the 5th and 6th grade on a more of a traditional elementary schedule as opposed to a middle schedule where the 7th and 8th have to. So we've started to kind of broach those ideas, and I am going to put a little working group together. I told the middle school staff from both schools this spring, to look at that. We're not contemplating that for the fall, right? So the earliest we would ever contemplate something like that is for the 23-24 school year. So that's not a short-term solution, but I see that potentially being a longer-term solution. I did also tell the staff that I will convene a group from both schools to take a look at class size in general. What is optimal? What are some different things that we can do outside of just adding a staff member to cut down on class size? Can we look at our schedule? Can we look at our teaming? Are there different ways to maneuver the teams so that we actually can just reduce class size without adding staff? Like we do in anything over the course of the spring, even outside of the budget that we'll look at and we'll review on March 1st, we're still waiting for kindergarten enrollment. That doesn't happen again for a second time until April. We're still working with the high school staff to kind of reconcile the student requests for classes because we build the schedule based on what the students want. So if it's determined later in the spring that we have to add an extra teacher beyond everything else we're doing in the schools, I would bring that forward as a recommendation to you, as I have when we've had to come to you and say, you know what, I think we need to add a 5th kindergarten section. I would come to you and say we need to add an extra section. I'm not afraid to do that, and we would find the money within the budget to be able to do that if the need were really there. But I don't think it's appropriate to just add a staff member without looking at this holistically. And I think we do need to look at it in the short term, and then also with the opportunity, say, a year or two from now, to look at that combined model, because that might actually resolve some of these problems and actually work to be a little bit more equitable in our program delivery. So yes, I guess to your question, we are looking at this. When we prepare the budget, I do prepare it based on the school committee policies that are in place right now, and we stick to and kind of adhere to that. But there is some wiggle room if we run into problems as the year progresses. That is something that we're going to be working on this spring.
Short term too, is there that possibility again of that group that kind of goes from Byam to McCarthy, to have that, or whatever that is, little
Oh,
shift
yeah,
group?
that is another thing, yes. I'm not quite prepared to bring that forward tonight. But one of the things that does come to us every year, just geographically, the way the schools are laid out, every student in our district who attends South Rower Center automatically feed to McCarthy. The majority of the students from Byam and Harrington feed to Parker. But there's a little kind of a wedge in the districting map of students that attend either Byam or Harrington that feed to McCarthy. And that does also help to kind of compound the disparity this year. Every year I look at it, and some years it really wouldn't make a difference to do away with that. Some years it would make a difference. So what I did actually do about a month or two ago, leading into the holidays, we identified the 40 or so students who would be part of that particular community that would feed McCarthy from Byam and Harrington. And I emailed those parents directly to just lay out the situation for them and give them an unofficial, kind of option. I wanted a little survey that if instead of going to McCarthy, if you would prefer to go to Parker, because again, you've kind of come up with those students, would you want that? And about half or so had actually said they would prefer if they had the option of considering to go to Parker as opposed to McCarthy. I think we may have gotten a few more if they didn't already have ties or other siblings at McCarthy, because if you've already had a transition there and you have a student there, you're not going to want to have kids in two different schools. But that is one of the things that I'm looking for, because if we can actually redistribute, 20 students who would have gone to McCarthy and have them go to Parker, and that's their option, right? It's not a big issue for us logistically, because the buses are kind of running that way anyway. Joanna didn't mind. So that's something that we can possibly work out. So that's like another short-term solution to try to keep those numbers down. But that is something that we will be talking about over the course of this spring, and I'm happy to provide updates for you.
Okay, thanks.
All right?
Donna?
With regards to class size, obviously it's something that concerns me as well, knowing the numbers that we have moving up from the elementary school to the middle school. And I know you and I are going to be meeting, but some of the things that I was kind of wondering about that, we can talk about is, we're talking about a class size. Are we talking about, that's the number of students that's in that class all day long? Are there students on IEPs that are being pulled out?
Right.
At various points throughout the day, so the numbers may drop. How many students on IEPs are teachers, on average, do they have in their classroom, for example? And are we looking at maybe some of the numbers, that are on the lower end? Obviously, we can't have a disproportionate number of kids on IEPs in a certain classroom, but are we, making it so that these kids can get the appropriate amount of support that they need, without having the numbers be too high and overwhelming the teacher with the needs of all of the students? And the other thing is what is the life of a day in the life of a middle school teacher? I don't really know that, what does that look like? Or an elementary school teacher or a high school teacher? Because I think that's important for us to know when we're making these decisions. What additional supports maybe, can we provide, to assist them, in the day-to-day operations that they have to go through? So.
I guess, to your earlier point, I agree. I mean, we do take a look at some of our specialized programs, and students may be assigned like a homeroom. But if the child's not staying in that particular classroom and they're going to say a pull-out type service or a pull-out type program, then they wouldn't really be included in the overall student head count, so we do look at that. We also do look at co-taught type rooms. So you might actually have a classroom that has a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher working together. So that's obviously, let's say you did have 25 or more than 25, you do have 2 adults in that classroom.
Right.
We also have para-supported classrooms, so that is also something that we do take a look at. And that does come into play, particularly when you're looking like the number of students on an IEP, or if you have some L learners in the classroom that might need extra supports as well, that also comes into it. So I do know we're going to talk about this, but yes, I mean, those are certainly things that we look at when we're doing just more general kind of assignment of staff and assignment of kids to buildings and classrooms. That all does factor in. And I forget the second thing you were talking about.
Like I said, just a day in the life of
Oh.
an elementary school, middle school, and high school teacher.
Sure.
As we, look at, what are their needs and how can we best, support them, just on the day-to-day activities and operations of, what they have to do. And with regards to those other supports, I do think it's important that we know that, right? Because if we just look at the number and we don't look at the additional supports that are provided, then it isn't a completely pure picture.
Right.
So,
Okay. I'll try to see how we can do that and figure out ways to produce that bigger picture for you.
And I actually understand that, but just for the purposes of discussion, I think we're asking more and more of staff to look at things like inclusiveness and so on in every class. And it adds a layer of additional requirements to positions, in the sense that, you need to make sure that everybody is part of an entire group and an entire class. And you're not really going to be able to, and shouldn't be, distinguishing out student has special needs, this student doesn't, where they're all part of the same class.
Yes.
Which is extremely important for us to continue to foster, I
Absolutely.
think,
Absolutely.
within the
But I was
system.
more
that-
thinking in terms of the level of preparation
Understood.
and, you know, that they have to take into consideration.
But it is, and so, and I understand, I see what Donna's asking in terms of what's the day in the life of a teacher at the particular different levels. I think it's actually changed quite a bit. And what we used to perceive as this is the day in the life of anyone in the workplace today is changed tremendously. And teachers, unlike many other professionals, don't have the option of working from home. Which is something that is going to be coming into the workforce more and more. So it would be interesting to see what level of support we can provide to our staff who do come to work every single day and have to leave their home because it's part of the job requirement. And we've seen that that's what the effective education is for a child, to actually be able to socialize and so on. So I think Donna's thought there is a very important one for us to understand.
Any other general questions about the budget at this point? I just wanted to, just for the people, the public at home, in terms of where to find the budget, it's on the business and finance page. So if you go to the website, it's not on the main page. So if you go to business finance and go to budgets, you'll be able to get it there. Only because I was searching for it earlier. And then, you know, when we do have the budget hearing, I don't know if everybody's okay with it. I don't know if we can let people come without registering. Previously, we said people had to register to come to speak, but since it's a budget hearing, if anybody wants to come to speak on the budget, just come to the meeting. Just follow the safety protocols that we have in place, you know, the masking and all that at this point. And then, you know, you can speak at the beginning in public comment, or you want to allow people to speak.
Yeah, we've always allowed people to, you know, not that it's totally free-flowing, because there is a structure to the review, but as we go page by page, if someone had a particular question about something, I'm certainly comfortable, I think the committee has always been, they can just come up and ask their question at that particular time. They could certainly give a global statement about the budget or whatnot if they want to, but they could just come up and ask a question, and then we'd be able to kind of discuss and deliberate on that particular page. But we can set up the room with some distancing, and very similar to the, you know, the table, people could come up and ask their questions if they want to. So I think that's
What's the date again, Dennis?
First, March 1st.
Tuesday, March 1st.
So is everybody okay with that? So people want to come, you don't have to pre-register, just come, and you can speak either at the beginning or as we present things as we go along. And if you can't come and you do have a question, feel free to email one of us, and we'll definitely present your questions during the meeting. All right, COVID update.
Yes, so I have, this is the second meeting of the month, so I have a little bit of a COVID update for you. I changed this up a little bit. We're going to be looking tonight at our overall pool testing program, the new at-home rapid antigen testing program that actually launched yesterday, and then our student vaccination status. So what we have done historically, and I'm just kind of updating this data for you, we always first just take a look at Chelmsford as a town. And these are the different age groups of students that they are tracking information on with regard to how many actually have either received just one dose of the COVID vaccine, or they're fully vaccinated and they've received their 2 doses. At this point in time, the definition of a fully vaccinated individual is someone who has received their either 2 doses of the Moderna or Pfizer, or the 1 dose of the J&J. Boosters are not included in this. So our youngest population, our elementary school students kind of heading into middle school, we have 59%, if you look at that far right column, about 59% are fully vaccinated at this point. And, you know, we're certainly appreciative that number is the one that's kind of jumping the most, because this particular group of students kind of came on later to be eligible to receive the vaccine. I know we have hosted, and we have another vaccine clinic that we're hosting tomorrow, have been very successful. Peggy Gump, our coordinator for school nursing, has worked very hard with Remedium Pharmacy to partner to host a number of different vaccine clinics and even booster clinics, and we've gotten a great response for those. Our second grouping of students are 12 to 15-year-olds. This is your middle and lower high school students. Overall, they've got about a 78% vaccination rate. Again, this is town-wide. That's good data. When we always talk about these slides, I do just kind of remind you that not all of these students are Chelmsford Public School students. So these are just residents of Chelmsford who happen to fall into these categories, and they may attend other private or parochial or tech schools. But they are all Chelmsford residents. And then our last grouping, which really affects mostly the high school, town-wide, they're at about an 87%, or there are an 87% vaccination rate, and that was as of last week. So if we go to the next slide, we actually now take a look at vaccine status for our just Chelmsford Public School students. And the first thing, the first line, again, this has been relatively stable. At the high school, we're at an 86% vaccination rate. So that, again, almost mirrors the town, which is really excellent. Again, that's something that we have been pushing, and I'm very happy that the kids have reached that grade level. And the other groups that you're really starting to see the increase again is at the elementary level. Those numbers have jumped pretty significantly since the last time we met a month ago because of the availability. In our two middle schools, Parker and McCarthy, are at 62% vaccination rates. That's really not too bad for the middle schools because you have to remember the 5th and 6th grade students weren't eligible until the last round of doses with the elementary. So they're really kind of right on each other's heels. And then, Byham Center, Harrington, and South Row are all in the mid-50s to low 60s as far as the vaccination rate. So these numbers are, I think, honestly, moving in the right direction. We have very good participation. We have very good information being shared with us from the families. And I do, again, we're tracking this, and we're going to see this to continue to grow as time moves on. Any question about vaccination status before we move to pool testing? Okay, so pool testing is our next area of participation, and this, again, is something that is going to continue. So this is not going to end in the schools. What we did make a switch to was we got away from the test and stay program, and in a couple of slides, we're going to talk about the rapid antigen home testing that we're doing as a district. But to be able to do and participate in that program, you had to either maintain pool testing in the district or participate in systematic testing. And we do not participate. We never had signed up for the systematic, so we've decided to stay with the pool testing. So the pool testing program, basically, it's voluntary. There's a rolling admission. Even if you haven't applied, you certainly, registered. Even if you haven't registered, you certainly can at any time, and you just jump in the next week's pool. So this is a once-a-week free opportunity for staff and students to receive pool tests within the building. We've actually cut down on the numbers of samples that we're putting in a pool, just in the event that we do get a positive, so that we have to do less reflex testing and follow-up testing with individuals. Again, very good participation rates in this. District-wide, we have about 1,750 students who are registered to participate. Any given week, we're probably seeing between 1,000 and 1,300 students participating in this. So again, very good numbers. Our participation rates always were higher at the elementary and middle school. The high school had lagged a little bit behind, but I do believe some of the reason the high school lagged behind is because a lot were vaccinated early on, and they felt if they were vaccinated, they didn't have to then pool test. From our perspective, as we look at, again, pool testing, it is a great way to get a free, this is a molecular lab-confirmed test, kind of your PCR gold standard test weekly, and then that ties into the at-home test. So Linda, we can go to the next slide. We consistently, from the very beginning of the school year, have reported on our district dashboard the pool testing results. And you'll see as we're looking at this, we've actually done this now for 17 weeks. This past week, we administered 1,187 tests, and we only had 6 positives out of that, so which is about less than a percent, about 0.5% were positive. You will see weeks 13 to 16 was kind of that spike coming back from the Christmas holiday. Those numbers have really subsided. So district-wide, even this past week, our overall COVID numbers are going to go down again. We seem to be beyond that Omicron variant, and we're definitely trending in the right direction. So we only had 6 positive pools district-wide last week, which was really excellent. And again, this data gets updated to the Chelmsford Public Schools website every Friday morning. So then I add that to the weekly newsletter. Any questions at all about pool testing? All right, moving along to, I did want to report, even though we're not going to be doing this going forward, I had been producing the monthly test and stay figures, so I wanted to close this out and put your January figures in here because we'd only reported through December the last time. So through the month of January, again, that was kind of our peak, we did administer 1,614 test and stay results. So again, these are individual tests of students based on being identified at the time as a close contact. And of those 1,614 tests, we ended up district-wide having 18 become positive. So that was a little over 1% positivity rate for that particular follow-up group. This is the reflex testing that we do with the BINEX tests. We then, on the next slide, break it out to be by school to give you a sense of the 1,614 tests that we conducted. And again, we had the 18 positives, and you can see that they're kind of spread a little bit through the schools. The biggest number happened to be at Harrington, but most were, ones, twos, and threes across the district. Again, vast majority are negative. What the state was seeing statewide was about 98% of students testing negative, which was the impetus to move toward the antigen program. As a district, we actually always had a little bit more favorable results even than the state, and we were averaging closer to 99 or 99.5% being negative. So we're kind of over that peak in January, and this will be the last month that we report on the test and stay program because we're not conducting that any further. Next slide talks a little bit about that new rapid antigen testing program. So I talked at the last meeting about this. I was very happy with the response rate that we received from both students and staff. So this is a second way to get a COVID test each week. And instead of doing the test and stay in the buildings, we were going to be sending last Friday out to all staff and students their home testing kit, and then we had the day off with the snow and ice. There was nothing we could do about that. So the test kits ended up going up Monday. But every other week, on a Friday typically, staff and students who registered for this program are going to go home with a box with 2 tests in it. And you're able to test at home. Please only take 1 test per 2 weeks because you're only going to get the 1 box to last you the 2 weeks. Directions and some instructional materials went out to families this morning on how to administer the test. There are little videos you can watch if you're having any questions, but it really is pretty straightforward. And there was some suggestions around, if you happen to be pool testing on, say, a Monday, then we'd recommend as a district you take the at-home test on, say, a Thursday, so that you're getting a couple of different data points over the week. You're getting an at-home rapid antigen test, which is a little less sensitive than the PCR molecular test, and you're getting that in the school setting once a week. Now, if you forget and you decide to give it the next day, that's fine. If for some reason, you get out of sorts and you give it the wrong day, nothing is wrong. You just don't get an extra test from us. So you can't give it Wednesday and then that's your weekly test. Ask for another one on Thursday. We just physically won't have the supply. So you basically have to kind of control yourself a little bit and only do the 1 test per week. But at the time when we had to commit to the state for our first shipment of tests, which actually came on time, which was excellent, we had a little over 2,700 staff and students participating. And just since we actually did that first wave of distribution, I think people saw the kits going out, we got a couple hundred more registrations online over the last couple of days. So I think we'll be over 3,000 when we do the next distribution next Friday. That really lines up well for us because it's the Friday before February vacation. So students and staff will be able to go home with the test kit that Friday, and they can hold off and take that test before they come back to school if they'd like, right after the vacation week. So that is in the works. That is, I think, really going to go very well for us. Excuse me. The only results that need to be reported to us are a positive test. So if you test negative, you do not need to notify the school of that. That was in the communication. You're only letting the school nurse and the school know if you test positive. So we will, again, track the number of kits that we actually distribute, but we will not be tracking, obviously, the number of negative tests like we had previously because we're only going to be collecting data on the positive tests.
Before we go to the next slide, so I happened to attend the CHIPS PTO meeting last night, and they do have a few concerns with the new program. They fully understand why we made the change, but their particular population is a little bit different, and that most of their kids can't be vaccinated at this point because of sensory issues. The whole swabbing of the nose isn't something that they all can really do. A lot of nonverbal kids that wouldn't be able to communicate if somebody in the class was sick or if they were not feeling well. So they just wanted to know if it's possible for them to just, if somebody were sick, just have a general close contact notice go out and say, hey, somebody in Miss so-and-so's class tested positive, just so they can then have the peace of mind to maybe go get a PCR test, because they don't have these other things available to them. So,
Yeah, we're not doing that anymore. So what, on this, we're not doing contact tracing. So if we do have a positive case that gets reported to us, we certainly log it into the system. We're tracking that case, and our school nurses and admin are working with that family to make sure they know about maybe an outside testing or quarantine dates and things like that when the people can report back to school. But aside from district-wide, we are advertising on the district dashboard once a week if we have a positive case within a school. Again, if they do participate in pool testing, they can. I do realize it's difficult. And that's why we didn't originally have them in the program. But the only way to administer or give them the at-home test kits was to have there be the option for them to participate in the pool testing. If they don't want to, that's totally fine. We just have to make that available to them. But we've gotten away from, because we're not contact tracing, providing a notice of close contact because we're not identifying them. And the communication of the positive cases is really now all on the district dashboard.
okay, they just wanted to know more, not a close, like Donna, you're a close contact, don't contact Jeff, but more just Miss so-and-so class, there was somebody that was sick, just send a general notice out, and if they wanted to, then go get a PCR, they could.
Yeah.
Just for peace of mind, that's what they were asking.
Right. I honestly, I get that.
Yeah.
I don't see us doing that because we're making the shift now. And I think we have to make that shift district-wide because this has become, whether it was close contacts or it was a positive case in a class, the only thing that the admin and the nurses had been doing up to this was sending notices home. So I do know that, like, if there are individual instances where, like, someone has a medically fragile child or whatnot, the school is going to work with those families so that they would know. But, I don't want to commit to putting out some kind of a notice where we're not doing that district-wide and then ever forget or have it not go out and have there be an issue. So K-12, the communication channel really is now posting to the district dashboard and then reporting the pool test results.
To Dennis's point, I think, it is worth keeping in mind that we have young kids who may be nonverbal, or just unable to express, that they're not feeling well and something like that. And sometimes a heads up for parents, just so they can keep an eye out is really helpful. I don't know how we would do that, but I do think it's important to be sensitive to that, especially at that age group.
They don't get, CHIPS doesn't go on the dashboard, do they?
They do.
They do, okay.
Yeah, we actually separate out CHIPS and Lions Pride. It's because they're both in the same building as two different line items. And, again, I wasn't at the meeting, but if people have questions or concerns, I would go back and talk to building admin and see what they suggest. Just, district-wide, though, we are moving to, advertising our positives on the district website, both the positive cases and the pool testing.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I was thinking is if they wanted to talk to the building admin, if the building admin had some suggestions, even if it was something different than we're doing through the elementary, middle, and high school levels to meet the needs of those kids and families, then I think we should take it into consideration.
Okay. The weekly dashboard. So this is the dashboard that actually gets, this is just a copy of last week's, that gets posted to our district website on Fridays. You will see, actually, and this is a live shot of last week's dashboard. The numbers have dropped pretty considerably from that peak that we had coming back from the vacation week. But we do actually list this, and you can see actually up on the dashboard, CHIPS and, say, Lions prior to the first two locations. And we reported this is over the course of 5 days. We had one case of a child and one case of a teacher in the Lions Pride program. Now, again, without getting too deep into this, I mean, even within those programs, these are pretty small, self-contained programs. The teacher may be in contact with the families anyway. I just don't want to, as a district, commit to something that I can't see through. So if people do have a concern, they should just, talk to their teacher, talk to the building admin.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, it'd almost be like, say, a life skills classroom or a special classroom. They may just have their own little communication system that's working for them. I just don't want to go creating something else.
Yeah, and if the building admin, as I said, have some suggestions that we can support them in, great.
But this is something that we're going to update. People really do seem to like this. We don't mind doing it at all, and it's a way to kind of proactively put out our cases, and you will see that the numbers have dropped again. This is last week pretty significantly from the peak, and they're going to be going down again tomorrow based on the numbers I have today. So we're going to keep doing that, and we'll get that updated. And the last slide, I think, just talks about a little bit of some of the updates that are around the corner that we don't fully know what's going to be happening with yet. So the current indoor mask mandate was extended by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education earlier through the end of February. So that mandate does end on February 28th. And I honestly don't know what they will do beyond February 28th. So we're awaiting word from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education with a decision and guidance for how districts should proceed. This has been something where it's almost been like every month, month and a half, they've just kind of pushed out that date. I really don't know if they're going to push it out beyond February 28th, just given kind of the climate and some of the different actions or stances that the department has been taking with regard to updates to mitigation practices and whatnot. That is something we're watching closely. I think one of the things that does concern me is that just the timing around a decision or an announcement, so that we,
Right in the middle of vacation.
right in the middle of vacation, Donna, just so that we can actually have some dialogue around that. But this just seems to be inevitably, it's not our call, and this is something that happens to be coinciding with the vacation weeks. So as soon as I hear from the state what's going to happen, I would let you know. Obviously, if the mask mandate is not extended, it then becomes a local control option. We do have a masking, or it's actually called face covering. We have a masking policy that basically we put into place at the beginning of the pandemic that is still on the books. So that does require us to wear masks in our K-12 buildings when we're in school. It has the exemptions for like going outside to recess and outside of buildings and things. But the committee would need to address it at that time, because when we voted the policy in, it specifically said the policy was in effect until it was further voted by the committee to rescind the policy. So again, based on timing and whatnot, when we hear what's going to happen, the state may extend it another month and we might not have anything to do about it. But if they didn't, then we would either have to put something on our agenda for the 1st of March, or even schedule a second meeting that week to talk specifically about this topic, depending on what the chair and the committee members would like to do. But I will have as much information at the ready, given the different options or scenarios that are going to come. But I did just want to put that on your radar to start thinking about. I think it's inevitable at some point that the mandate gets removed. I just have a feeling at this point that it may not be extended beyond the 28th. It's just, from some of the information that I'm hearing and I'm seeing, and even just, again, kind of managing these numbers. So I just think we do need to be prepared that if it is lifted, what action do we want to take as a group moving forward?
Thoughts, questions? I mean, so this would mean that when if they were to rescind the mask mandate, when we come back on the 28th, it would basically be our policy in place still for the schools until we meet on the 1st.
Yeah, the way I read the current order from the state was that through February 28th, you had to wear masks in the buildings. So the Monday we come back from vacation, we still have to wear masks. In the event that the mask mandate statewide was lifted, that at the end of the 28th, technically, Tuesday, March 1st during the day, one could make an argument if we didn't have a policy that it wouldn't be required, it might just be recommended. But you actually have a policy on the books that says you still have to wear masks. So according to your policy, even on Tuesday the 1st, before you had a chance to meet later on that night, we would have masks in the building, and that would be the expectation. You could then meet later on Tuesday, March 1st in the evening and decide to rescind the policy, decide to make it a recommendation as opposed to a requirement. The other factor that some districts are dealing with is their local boards of health have actual mandates or requirements. We don't in Chelmsford. So our Board of Health recommends masking while indoors, but they don't require it. So that's not a consideration for us. Some districts, even if they wanted to remove the mask, the Board of Health would override and you'd have to wear them in the schools. But we don't have that as a requirement in Chelmsford. So it really would just be a vote of the school committee if nothing were to change. And I think the earliest we'd be able to do that is likely on the 1st, perhaps after the budget hearing. But worst case scenario, we could schedule something, we'd have enough time to do it like the next night or something. But the expectation would be masks enforced until you actually rescind your policy.
Everybody good with that? Okay, and then, if they do decide to get rid of the mandate, that's definitely a discussion we can have, on the 1st.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right?
And that's what I had for COVID updates. So I think the test distribution went fairly well. So I'm happy about that, and I'll let you know if we have any hiccups across the way, but we had no issues getting the test kits in, which was excellent. We didn't know if that was going to be the case.
I have a bunch of tests in my house now.
One a week.
I'm
Take
like,
one a
no,
week.
I know. They're,
What-
put them on the top shelf. Nobody can get them.
Thanks.
Good.
So, but I'll give you an update on that if we hear more.
Great. All right, last
All
thing.
right, last thing is Linda has a MCAS update for us.
Yeah, let me wrap it up with a little bit of student testing. So just to clarify a few things, as we know with the pandemic, there's been some, changes with student testing throughout the past few years. Just to give you some context, 2019, spring of 2019 was the last time students took MCAS the way we typically know that they take it. They take 2 sessions in ELA, math, and science, which is the science, technology, and engineering. 2020, spring of 2020, there was no MCAS. And then in 2021, which was last spring, we took the truncated version of the ELA and mathematics, which was just the 1 session for the students. And then moving forward for this spring, we are going back to what we know for MCAS with the 2 sessions for all students. Now, it's not just so clear cut for all the classes. So the class of 2021 that graduated last year, they were able to have the competency determination waiver, so they didn't have their ELA, math, or science scores and were able to graduate based on the rigor of the coursework that they took at CHS. This still applies to the class of 2022, and that is going to be for their ELA and for their math and science as well. So this is the last class leaving that did not take MCAS and will not need it for a competency determination because our coursework will support that competency determination through the state. Now, just to complicate things a little bit further, our class of 2023 will also fall under that competency determination waiver for science only because they took the smaller version, the 1 session version of ELA and math. And honestly, the great news from that is that it was only 4 students at CHS that did not pass MCAS, and they're already scheduled for their retest. So we're very confident that those students will have their MCAS as their competency determination and will not need an educational proficiency plan. So that's the good news. So all of that hard work that's been going into it. Now, this also affected the Adams Scholarship, the Abigail Adams Scholarship. You may have heard of it. This allows students that are in the top 10% that have received exceeding the standards to be able to receive a tuition voucher at state colleges, such as UMass, the UMass system, Bridgewater. So any of those students that did want to be considered for that scholarship were contacted, and they already took the test for that this past fall. So any students that were going to be eligible to receive that scholarship will receive it from taking the MCAS this past fall. So that has been cleared up. And then the other part that MCAS affects is now that we have the seal of biliteracy, and that's for our students that are going to show proficiency both in English and their native language. The students that are in the class of 2022 and 2023, the ELA waiver will be considered for them, that if they pass their English classes with the rigor that is necessary, that will count as the ELA performance for them, and then they'll take their native language test for the seal by literacy consideration. So for the past 2 years, we've had 18 students receive the seal by literacy, so that's really great since we just started the program a couple of years ago. So more and more students are starting to become active in that, and we're trying to really promote that. Just Know Outlet, our world language coordinator, has been, actively working with students, and because I think they think it's just like some of the languages that we're so used to, but there are so many different other native languages out there, and those students really would love an opportunity to have that as an accolade when they graduate from Chelmsford High School. And then additionally, we have the access testing, which is for our L students, our English language learners, and that started in January, and we anticipate to be wrapping up even before vacation week. But we do have until March 4th to complete the student testing for our L students. And underneath, you'll see I gave you in the memo just kind of the windows of what happens. So high school is set dates, so we don't have to set those dates. The state sets those for us. You'll see a window for students in grades 3 through 8 in ELA, math, and science, and those are set at the schools. We actually just had the meeting on Monday with the 4 elementary principals and 2 middle school principals and put it into our calendar. So parents will start to hear soon, like if it's gonna be grade 5 and 7 testing together, 6 and 8, if it's gonna be 3rd grade this week, 4th grade this week, and ELA, just so we had a handle of where they are when they're testing, also with the technology support that they'll need at the schools, because these are all online next generation tests.
Any questions? So starting this year, everybody, like 10th graders are gonna need to pass the MCAS, at least math and English too,
Yeah.
to graduate again.
And I put 9th graders in there because some of our students that are, because we at the high school administer the biology test for our science test. So students that are in the track that are on the honors biology in 9th grade will take it with the sophomores. They don't wait a year because they're taking the course now. So those students would not have to take their science MCAS their sophomore year if they were in that course.
And they Dixied, they were gonna do a chem one, they Dixied that one and something else.
Yeah, well, they still have it, the chem one's there, and then it's the physics one, so but we've always administered the biology one, that's
Yeah.
just been our test. You have a choice, and we can offer that if we needed to, but our students take biology.
I just thought they were eliminating those, actually, I thought they were
Oh, they're
eliminating.
yeah,
They're
they're
eliminating
changing,
chem and something else.
yeah, they're changing a few of them and
Yeah.
eliminating them and
Yeah.
putting other ones in.
Right.
But we would still be able to offer that if a student like came to us and had taken only chemistry, we'd be able to administer that.
Okay, great.
It's a tough one.
All right, any other questions on testing? All right, I think that's it, right? Any liaison reports?
Oh, yeah, one of my, so Harrington Elementary PTO met, on the 2nd. And, as usual, they received, all parents who attend these meetings get an excellent report from the principal's office, always. And that's one of the great reasons to attend the meeting. The other one is that the Harrington PTO does always have a teacher representative. And in this particular meeting, the teacher representative is Mrs. Kowalik. And she presented on the math challenge that they're going to have in the month of March, which everybody seems to be looking forward to. And the PTO will collaborate on that with prizes and so on. And they also talked about the fact that they're going to have a readathon, pizza, paperback, scholastic book fair. Everything will be happening in the month of March.
Great. Anyone else? PTO, yeah.
I had South Rose PTO meeting last night. We're continuing to meet remotely. Looking forward to getting back together with everybody at some point. They have some great activities coming up. They are going to be doing a virtual science fair, for example. Their book sale coming up, and one of the things that I thought that they were doing that was really neat was they're asking for, as part of the book sale, on donations of gently used books from parents or teachers, and they've paired with an organization, the community will take those books and get those to underprivileged children. So, a lot of great things happening, and as you know, we heard from their presentation 2 weeks ago, they're just continuing to do a great job out there. And
Jeff?
I'm sorry, PTO's, BIAM's PTO meeting is tomorrow night,
Wow.
and it's also virtual.
Jeff?
The Boosters Club met last Thursday, and some of the high school coaches, George Peterson, the football coach, Jeff Parks, the rugby coach, Sean Wright, the boys lacrosse coach, were there, along with Kevin Leonard, the hockey coach, who brought his captains, Owen Flanagan, Adam Lazine, and Jack Pelkey, who thanked the Boosters Club for buying a skate sharpening machine, so both teams, boys and girls, could use it. And then the girls' indoor coach, Matt Garenti, was there to announce that our girls' sprint medley relay will be participating in the national tournament in Manhattan, and that consists of 2 legs of the 200-yard, 1 leg of the 400-yard, and 1 leg of the 800-yard. And the 4 athletes involved are Olivia Hall, Maddie Priestley, Naomi D'Souza, and Amelia Kelly, and the Booster Club volunteered to give some funds to help support that trip. And they're having their, congratulations to the girls and to Matt, the coach. It's, quite a big deal. And the Booster Club will be having their St. Patrick's Day gathering on March 19th at the establishment from 7 to 11. So you can go on their website to buy tickets if you're interested. And the Alumni Association met and once again wanted to remind us that October 15th of 2022 will be the next Hall of Fame. So get your tickets. They're a big sale.
All right, John, anything?
I don't have any.
Okay, I already mentioned, attended the CHIPS PTO meeting and the concerns, but on the positive side, they had their basket raffle. It was the most successful one to date. They're still being able to provide enrichment activities to students. They have something planned for every month going forward, which is great. And they're planning several staff appreciation events throughout the spring. And they thank the superintendent and the school committee for the support in terms of the staff appreciation lunches and everything else that are going on. Yep. All right, anyone have any new items you want to bring up? I know I mentioned before, the select board would like us to meet with them either on the 14th or 28th to select members for the SHOBA. Any preferences? I'm open to either one, I don't know.
Did you say the 14th?
14th or the 28th of March.
Oh, March, okay. Either works.
Oh, of March.
Of March, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not Valentine's Day, Jeff. No, I
I
wouldn't do
was
that.
gonna say, can't do that.
You have big plans.
Either one is fine for me.
Either one's fine? All
I
right, so
think of
we,
nobody I would rather spend Valentine's.
so we say the 14th for now?
The 14th is
All
good.
right, 14th, all right, let's say the 14th for now, okay. All right, anybody have any public comment they want to share? No? Okay, I will take a motion to adjourn then.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. The only motion.